Hi everyone. I'm here with Michael Alexis, who is a lawyer from Canada, and he's a freelance consultant with clients like Ramit Sethi, and he also writes guides on how to make money and build businesses. And one thing I've been thinking a lot about recently is how if you want to be successful in pretty much any field, you need to be prepared to do things that are outside of your comfort zone. And Michael seems like pretty well placed to give advice on this kind of thing from his experience. So I thought we could have a chat and maybe he could just talk a bit about his experience with doing uncomfortable things and how he's got over that. So one thing I thought we could start off by talking about is networking, which is a word that I think has a lot of negative connotations, but at least in my mind, it basically just means being able to approach and connect with people within the fields you want to work with, And it seems like a really important, useful thing to be able to do to be successful in business, but like in pretty much any field where there's any level of competition. So I guess I just wanted to start by asking, like, why do you think networking is something that people find so uncomfortable? And is it maybe that people are thinking about it in the wrong way?
I can't speak for other people. I can just tell you what I see in myself, and from some conversations that I've had with friends, colleagues, etc. I think people are uncomfortable in new situations, right? So it's not necessarily that it's networking, it's that it's something new and we haven't practiced it before. I think people are uncomfortable because they're unprepared, right? You show up at a networking event and you don't know what you're going to say, and it's a whole lot more nerve-wracking than if you've prepared, maybe topics of conversation or the 30-second pitch about how you introduce your business or any of these things. So I think people aren't necessarily uncomfortable about the, what would be popular to say, like the social aspect or the fear of reaching out or something like this. It's more those very, very tangible barriers that you can overcome.
So the barrier is like not knowing what to say. So I suppose one concern I would have with that is, so on the one hand, there's the worry of not knowing what to say, but then on the other hand, there's the worry of being over-prepared and coming across as disingenuine or like you're reading off of a script. So how do you balance those difficulties?
Yeah, there's certainly a knack to any kind of public speaking. You're right. I think you want to be genuine. So here's what I do. When I prepare to do an interview, when I prepare to introduce myself at an event, when I prepare to, I'm speaking at an event and I'm going to be the main guy for the next 20 minutes or whatever, I write notes, but I don't write it word for word. I think where people get into trouble is when you see them standing there with their, cue cards, and it's quite literally, "Hello, Jess. Let me tell you about natural networking." And it's really, really uncomfortable for everybody, right? Whereas, if you just have some notes for the interview and you come here and you say, okay, these are like the 3 big points about networking, or these are the 3 ways to talk to people about giving you money, clients, then you can fill in the gaps, and the gaps provide the natural part. The structure, the planning you did provides the preparation part that's going to help you overcome your barriers.
Yeah, one thing that I find quite useful that I think probably works better with public speaking than the more natural scenarios is almost like having a script and learning it, but then then going and standing up and ad-libbing a bit and doing some on-the-moment things, but just feeling like you have something to fall back on, I think is helpful. So having some notes or some script or something.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that we're talking about like a highly personal thing, right? Everybody's got a different level of fear.
Absolutely.
Everybody's got different ways of preparing. So experiment, see what works for you.
But I think one of the difficulties with networking is overcoming that initial barrier of discomfort. So for some people, often there's this initial discomfort barrier that stops them from going to the networking event or going and approaching a person. Like that's the thing I find most difficult at a networking event, like just approaching a person and saying hi. So do you have any tips on how to overcome those kinds of barriers?
Yep. So let me tell you about a specific example where I was uncomfortable in the past, and then lead that into how I've overcome it and become more comfortable over time. So, networking, reaching out to people, cold calling, trying to convert, relationships into clients, etc. All of these things are very related. Here's one example of where I was uncomfortable in the past. There's a person who I look up to, who I had provided free work to on multiple occasions, but I'd never converted them into a client. It wasn't a priority. It hadn't come up. I was busy with other things. And also it just, I don't know, wasn't necessarily going to be an easy sell. That's sometimes a barrier for people too. So I approached it. I wrote him a short email. It said, this is the service I would like to provide for you. This is an example of somebody else I did for it before. Here's the expected results and benefit, and here's what I charge for it. And I was uncomfortable sending that email because even though I'd done this countless times before with other people, with this particular person, I was changing the relationship from, we know each other, I've helped you out with things in the past, to, well, we know each other, but I want you to pay me going forward. Pretty uncomfortable thing. Here's what happened. He wrote back pretty quickly and he said, this is great, but actually I'm just not ready for it yet in my business. And then he proposed working together in another way. So even though I failed at what I wanted to sell him, he still became a client. And maybe this is a really important thing for everybody to hear. There's so many things I've done in my life that failed really quickly, but they always led to more opportunities, or more often than not led to more opportunities, right? If you call one person, they might not turn into a client. If you call 10 people, one of them probably will.
Yeah, one I think more general point that I found really useful when it comes to just like doing uncomfortable things in general, which I think you were getting at there, is the goal is not the thing that's out of your control, the response from the other person or the outcome. The goal in your mind should be just trying and doing the thing. And as long as you try and you do the thing, then that's a success, and you should kind of get positive feedback from that, even if you fail in the broader sense of not necessarily getting the feedback that you wanted. Yeah. And I think if you can cultivate that kind of attitude, then it helps a great deal. And maybe starting off with the smaller uncomfortable things, like writing an uncomfortable email that you can sort of control and just force yourself to press send. In some ways that seems easier than approaching someone. So one thing I thought might be interesting, so you told us about a time when you felt really uncomfortable putting yourself out there, but managed to overcome the discomfort and did it anyway. Have there been any times where you felt that discomfort and not managed to overcome it and ended up not doing something? And are there any differences? Can you think of examples like that? And are there any differences? Like, what do you think were the key differences between those times?
So in the past, sometime where I was uncomfortable and didn't end up acting. Yeah. I think we could go into anybody's past, but okay, let's go into mine and let's find something specific.
I think you can learn as much from failures as you can from successes.
Here's what my mind's going to. I'm thinking like high school. Everybody in high school has that girl or guy that they like, right? Including me. I'm sure there was a girl who I was afraid to talk to. There were also other girls that, I did ask out and we went and had a great time, etc. In business, has there been somebody who I should have reached out to? I don't think so. I from pretty early on was confident approaching, anybody, higher level people. I always approached them in a very genuine way. Truthfully, most of my sales haven't come from me pitching people. They've come from people making a request from me because they know I do good work. They've seen me doing work for other clients, or
that's the ideal, isn't it?
Or they just trust. It's the absolute ideal, right? If a top person in the field you want to be in, one of the best clients you have, reaches out to you and says, hey, do you want to work together? You're doing something right. That being said, I know and appreciate that not everyone's in that position. If your name's not already out there, it's not going to happen. So we can, let's push how to get yourself into that position a little bit later into the conversation. But now, let me tell you how I went from uncomfortable. I talked about that one, pitching the guy and turning into a client anyways, great, to comfortable. What has made me very, very comfortable with this is that I've become confident in the value that I provide to others. And okay, value is thrown around all over the internet and business books and everywhere else for that matter. Let's actually define it. To me, providing value means the other person is going to get the same or more out of the transaction, out of the connection than I do. So, maybe I'm giving them my time, maybe I'm giving them money, maybe they're giving me one of those or something else, but they're getting more out of it than I am. I think it's so important. And The other two, we've kind of mentioned. How did I get better at this? One, I pushed myself through it, right? I could give you countless other examples of things where I was uncomfortable doing it the first time, but I got better over time, and then it becomes second hand, right? You were probably uncomfortable the first time you got on a bike. Some people still are, but you keep doing it and you get more comfortable. This keep in mind. You can push through it. The other one, again, is that preparation. And the more I prepare, the more comfortable I am. And if you push yourself through that initial barrier, you almost can go on autopilot if you're prepared well enough. You kind of alluded to that earlier, right? By being so well prepared, you're there and ready to speak regardless of whether you're reading it or not.
So do you think with most things, even if they start out being highly, highly uncomfortable, like public speaking or approaching and pitching someone that you respect a lot, do you think even these things for most people, if you do them enough, can become almost completely comfortable? Or do you think there's something in the nature of these things, there'll always be like a slight nervousness or discomfort? Like, do you still feel slightly nervous when you do these things, or is it completely?
Let me give you an answer that's going to look like a triangle. I'm going to try to start high level and get really, really specific. So here's another situation where I was pretty uncomfortable at first. Standing up and speaking in court. Now, not just because it was something new, but because I was speaking in front of other lawyers, I was speaking in front of clients, I was speaking in front of judges. And judges are some of the smartest, most critical people you will ever meet, right? They're listening to every word, and every word you say has to be correct or they're going to call you on it. Scary situation. Yeah. So first time I stood up in court, my legs were shaking, right? You couldn't see it behind the table, but my legs were shaking. And that was regardless of how well I was prepared. The second time, I was shaking a little bit less. Now, I'm pretty comfortable going into court. I know that the preparation offsets that nervousness, but there's still some small element. And that element comes from the variety, the diversity of law, right? Every time I go in, it's for something slightly different. Maybe it's a different judge. Maybe it's a different lawyer on the other side. It's a different client. It's a different, it's a different matter that I'm speaking to. So now, okay, 99% of the discomfort is gone. I'm used to this environment, but you still get that 1% that comes in and makes you uncomfortable. So that, I think, is differentiated from if you literally are doing the same thing every time. Yeah. That one, I think you can totally overcome.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I guess it's the uncertainty that's making you uncomfortable there, that comes with the variety, right? Like the situation's slightly different, and so you can't quite predict what's going to happen, which might be the same with like approaching or pitching a different person. You just don't know how they're going to respond to you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So could you maybe give an example of who is the best person that you know at networking or pitching people or doing these different things, and what makes them particularly good at this, and what have you learned from them?
So Ramit Sethi, who you mentioned earlier, is an extraordinary salesman, and he literally asks hundreds of thousands of people to give him money, right, via his email list. Here's what's different about him from the vast majority of people. So one, he knows the value he provides, right? His students, I used to interview his students and I helped him prepare case studies from them. I mean, Julia, one of my friends, she was earning $8 an hour drawing characters at Legoland. She took Ramit's course, earned $1,000, and she's earned, a couple $100,000. Huge difference. Or, Eric, who doubled his salary, or another person who, built a $250,000 business. Or these were extraordinary results, and those are some of the best in the courses. But there are so many examples, right? I did something like 100 interviews, 100 of these conversations with people that had gotten great results from his course. That is providing value. That is what he's confident in. So, number one is he knows the value he provides. Number two, systemization. Again, this is something that people talk about very broadly, and it gets a little bit evasive when you try to get specific because it's, quite frankly, a complicated topic. It's hard to talk about, how do you create systems? Here's one of the way Ramit does it. He's doing most of his sales through email. So the emails are written in advance. They're tested. They've, done multiple versions. They've even internally been tested to make sure that they convert. It's all very mechanical. He's taken the emotion out of it. He's also taken his own willpower out of it. I don't know, but maybe he still has some insecurities about selling to people. I doubt it, but it's on automatic now because the emails are in the campaign system. He has people working with him to make sure that those get sent out on time, right? It's all of a sudden it's a machine instead of, a person with their internal barriers and challenges and insecurities and, oh, am I going to upset people and all of this other things. No, there's none of that with Ramit.
But by the time you get to the machine, you want to be really sure that you've got content to put into the machine that's good, I suppose. So you couldn't necessarily just start like that, but it's a good way to...
So that's not entirely true. I have a side project that I worked on recently. I hired people to start emailing and calling businesses. They're interviewing them just to learn about lessons that they teach, lessons and this kind of thing. So I don't have a system figured out, but I do have people making phone calls for me because I know that even if we start slightly chaotic, it will narrow down into something, good, productive over time. And I am making sure that we provide value to the people that we interview in a specific way that isn't so relevant here. So that's actually something I'd recommend. Like, if you're up against a major barrier, for example, cold calling, a lot of people are terrified of cold calling. I don't mind it, right? Did a ton in the past. We could call somebody right now and I'll try to sell them something. But I might not be successful, depending on what it is.
But that's not what it's about. So.
But that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
So if you really can't make yourself do it, and more so, if you are doing it, but you're so nervous that you're totally bombing it, you're not getting good results, outsource it. Hire somebody, right? Pay somebody $100 to make 10 phone calls. I know $100 is a lot of money for some people, but if that's what gets you from your current step of no progress to the next step of potentially huge gains, it's worth it every single time.
Yeah, I suppose the only problem with that, so there by outsourcing it, you're managing to get the outcome that you want, but you're not getting better at, basically you're sort of still avoiding having to do the thing yourself. So I think in the ideal situation, you want to get to you're less flexible than in future. You want to get to a situation where you can make the cold call yourself. But at the end of the day, if all you care about is the outcome, then it is good to get someone else to do it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the third thing with Ramit is that he acknowledges his insecurities, his weaknesses. He knows that there's lots of introspection going on, but he separates those from his business and he moves on, right? This is, again, this sounds kind of fluffy, but it's something that I do too. Yes, I'm nervous about going to speak in court, but let's put that aside, get the job done, and if it comes back in the future, I'll deal with it then. Usually it doesn't. Yeah. Here's a little tangent that I wasn't planning to talk about, but I think is really, really relevant here. So Andrew Warner, Mixergy.com, he, a few months back, released a course that he calls TrueMind, and the idea of it is that you can harness this negative chatter in your mind and convert into positive chatter instead. So whenever you think, oh, I want to quit my job and start a business. Well, what comes up in your mind? Things like, oh, I don't know anything about business, or I'm going to totally fail and lose all my money, blah, blah, blah. So the process is very, very simple. You write down the goal you want, quit job, start a business that makes $100,000 a year. You list off that negative chatter, and don't just list it off in your mind, write it down. Writing things down is so powerful because it takes it out of this endless mind circle and makes it into something tangible. And sometimes when you look at it on paper or you have somebody else look at it, it's a lot easier to see how ridiculous they are. One of my favorite questions is, if a friend told you, you can't quit your job and start a business, you're not ready yet, how would you reply? And for a lot of people, they're going to instinctively say, well, go to hell, Fred. You don't know anything. And maybe that's what you ought to be telling the negative chatter in your mind too. So get all the negative stuff out on page, challenge them one by one, tell me why each of those things isn't true or why you don't want it around, and then write positive statements to counter them. And this process, right, very, very simple, but again, makes our negative chatter, our insecurities tangible. It gives you like specific answers to overcome them. And then whenever it comes up like, oh yes, I would be uncomfortable doing this, then you have the positive comment you made. Maybe the positive comment is, well, you succeeded at phoning teachers in the past, so you can succeed at phoning judges too, or whatever. That's obviously not a specific example, but hopefully will help anybody that listened.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good suggestion. It's a bit like, I don't know if you know of cognitive behavioral therapy, but that's essentially what CBT suggests that you do with like any negative thoughts that affect your mood. And I think it makes you be more rational about these insecurities rather than when they're in your mind, they can get very out of hand. So yeah, that's definitely good advice. So previously, you've made the point a few times that what's really important for making yourself feel more comfortable putting yourself out there is being confident that you have like value and something valuable to offer. And you also alluded earlier to the fact that obviously what the ideal situation is to be in a situation where other people are coming to you because they know that you've got value. But there is this issue of like, how do you get from the stage where you don't really feel like you have anything valuable to offer, or other people don't feel that you have, to that stage where people are coming to you?
One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was do informational interviews, right? I was doing this startup when I was a student, and I thought my challenge was, go cold call these businesses and market to all of these other people, and then they'll come together. But I sat down with a mentor and he said, no, you're not ready to sell anybody anything yet. Just sit down and talk to them. So what I did was I went and emailed, a dozen people, and we went out for coffee, and I said, how would this work for you if I built it? And, what would you want to pay? People don't always have really good answers to all of these questions, but there were a couple of benefits that came out of it. One is, I genuinely did it for learning, and I did learn. And two, because I already had this connection with the people, they were willing to become clients when I was ready. And that's huge. The business I'm talking about was a Groupon clone, so a Groupon daily deal site. And at the time, it was like everybody and their brother was starting these. And businesses were getting 10, 20 phone calls a week asking to be featured on these sites that wanted to gouge them for 50% of their money. Versus, well, I had coffee with this guy, Michael. Of course, I'm going to read his email. Of course, I'm going to consider. And again, most of them did become clients of the business, which was very, very good. So informational interviews. Something else that I figured out on my own is instead of pitching individuals, so, you want this work to come to you before you provide value. Instead of pitching individuals, pitch referral hubs. So you're still going to have to figure out how to provide value to a referral hub, but let me tell you what that is. Again, that business. So after I did the networking, then I started making phone calls. Then I started, cold call after cold call, hundreds of these things. And at first it was, the cupcake shop just hangs up on me, or the pizza place. A guy at a pizza shop actually told me off because I had interrupted his day for 30 seconds. I actually went to that one in person because he told me to, and then he told me off in person. It was ridiculous. Some people are ridiculous, but you get over it. Then what happened was I connected with this lady. She was an esthetician, right? She does hair and nails and makeup and all of these other things. That is like a golden referral hub because she talks to people all day long. And a lot of those people are business owners. And, reaching out to her, connecting with her meant, within a week, I think 3 or 4 other people had contacted me to be featured on the site. So what makes referrals so powerful is you're not selling yourself anymore. Somebody else is selling you. And okay, Jess, like if you tell me, Michael, I'm a consultant and I'm the best in the world at it, I don't believe you. But if somebody else goes, oh, you have to meet my friend Jess, she is the best consultant in the world, I go, okay, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, it's much more legitimate from someone else.
we have this very, very interesting bias based on source. And if we look at
Well,
another,
it's not completely a bias, right? Because so I've got an incentive I've got like an incentive other than truth to tell you that I'm the best consultant in the world. But this other person, well, maybe they do, but they're less likely to. So it's not completely crazy. But anyway, sorry, carry on.
could be. Although actually one scary thing is, and referral fees are often working in the background, right? So if somebody gives you a referral,
yeah.
yes, still be critical about it, especially if they use the words best in the world.
Yeah.
So here's some more examples. As a lawyer, I try to connect with, instead of, the end client, it's real estate agents and mortgage brokers and accountants who, again, can become hubs who send work over time and can send people that are, qualified customers, who can send people who they think that I'll work well with. And that's very, very, very good. Very, very healthy for the business. It's really going to depend on the business you're in, who one of these connection hubs is, but try to think out of the box, right? Like for me, for the business one, it wasn't like I knew, oh, I should go connect with an aesthetician because that's going to lead to lots of business. I found it over time. Good. So how could you be more intentional about this? Try to think of the connecting points in your industry or any related industries. Try to think of people that talk to lots of other people, and you should be able to narrow it down to a few. Send them a quick email. Here's what that email should look like. Hi, person's name. I found you via X, their website, LinkedIn, whatever. I'm a lawyer here in Guelph. I'm connecting with people for mutual referrals. Are you available for tea this week? And then I'll suggest a specific date and time. And that's it, right? Like, don't give them a long spiel. People don't like to read long spiels. Just make it really, really short and you'll get a reply and you'll make connections, and yeah, it should go well.
Yeah, I like that. That seems like, a really good idea. So finally, maybe could you just say one really concrete, immediate thing that you would recommend someone do if they want to get better at putting themselves out there or selling themselves or doing similarly uncomfortable things?
Yeah, so thing number one, like I just said, take somebody out for coffee. It doesn't even really matter who it is for the first one. If you can't think of anybody, if you're having insecurities about connecting with people, take a real estate agent out, because every one of them, 99% of them, will want to meet you because their business is based on, the more people they know, the better. So take a real estate agent out. Remember that networking is one of those things that almost everybody agrees that they should do, but most of them don't. So when you reach out to somebody and say, hey, can we please go for coffee or tea or lunch or beer or whatever you think is appropriate in the context, like, chances are you're doing them a favor, because all they have to do now is say yes, and then they've made a connection and they've ticked off their networking box for the week. And that's actually providing value on its own. If people, we kind of have to be locally, but if somebody sends me an email and says, Michael, can we please meet for coffee on Friday at 1? I look at my calendar. If 1's open, I'm probably going to say yes.
Cool. Thank you very much, Michael. This has been really interesting.
It's my pleasure.